Hello and welcome to season 5, episode 9 of Dualistic Unity. I am finding that life is starting to become even more dreamlike than it's been. I find that the less seriously I take myself and the less I think about myself, what's left is just what is. There's not so much division to be perceived between myself and the environment that I'm experiencing. And there's a lightness to it that I don't think can be taught or even adequately expressed. It's just something you kind of have to find out for yourself through the willingness to question everything you think you are.
And once you've done that and you find yourself in that state of, and now what? Do something with it. Get out there, express yourself, try something, challenge yourself, learn something. Anything that you would have told yourself that you couldn't do or shouldn't do, or somebody might do better, go find out. That's really the only way that you can. It's the only way you can witness what you're capable of is to just jump in and do it. Don't listen to the tiny voice inside your head that's thinking it knows what's possible. It only knows what's been possible before you. And even then, it has a bias. It has a way that it wants to perceive those things. And so it's not necessarily the truth. Jump in, find out. And that said, I am very excited for our guest today, Quinn Hunchar, who is an actor and performer who has appeared in film and television, commercials, music videos, has done modeling and voiceovers, has trained in improv, dance, piano. I could probably go on, and is a perfect example of everything that we were just saying in terms of jump in, find out. Who knows what you'll learn along the way? And so, Quinn, without any further ado, thank you so much for joining us. We would love for you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how it is you came to do all of these wonderful things.
Hello, thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here. You know, it's life is wild, and it's just a never-ending unfoldment of what do I do next, like you were saying. And lately I've just been a little bit floating through life, trying to figure it out, like I think we kind of all are. And yeah, I don't know. I've my life is not what it once was, and not how it was that you guys came to discover me, but we're just figuring it out. And the acting stuff, the dancing, the music, that's all played a big part in my life, and it's been a little bit on the back burner for a bit. However, can I get back in there and see what kind of crazy stuff we can stir up in life?
Now, that's really interesting. And I'll pass it to Andrew in a second, but this is almost more interesting because of all of those experiences, because obviously you've had a lot of experiences up until now, and they're on the back burner. I imagine that's inspiring a lot of different insights about yourself, a lot of growth, a lot of questions. I'm even more curious about what's happening in your life right now.
100%. Yeah, my life right now is a regular Joe Schmo type of life. I go to work, I go home, I do laundry, got my cats, feed my cats, and lay in the sunshine, breathe the air. But yeah, as of now, I'm just regular life in it, which I've found to be very healing. Um, I was pretty much set on a path at a young age, and I walked that path for a good bit, and it led me to working at a bar. And I love it. It's nice to be able to connect with all the people of the world, and not have the expectations that were bestowed upon me at a young age.
That's super fair. It's actually interesting because I feel like a lot of people go through experiences like that on some degree, a big shift in their life. They see themselves in a specific way, and then all of a sudden that way doesn't make as much sense anymore, or it doesn't really, their idea of themselves doesn't really match how they feel or what they think they are. And so I'm curious, just with that process then of a shift of growing up, maybe with some more expectations, some more ideas, maybe not even that you had of yourself, but that other people had of you, and then you kind of took on to yourself. what was that like in handling, if you can remember when you were younger, and what was that process like to let go of? Was it difficult, or did it just kind of seamlessly happen because you were willing to do so?
The expectations thing from other people is what has been the most difficult through this process, because like you got grandma calling and everybody you grew up with, oh, you still doing that, oh, how's that going? And it's like, no, I'm just taking it day by day and seeing where life takes me. But I'd say to separate from that on an internal level was a lot easier to do. Of course, I still have those thoughts ringing in my head of like what could have been, what should have been, blah blah blah. But like, I don't know. I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be, and the people that are, close to my life and know me and love me, understand that. And there's an air of disappointment, however, but not from myself. I'm pretty content with where I'm at. But when you got to pay all the bills and your bank account hits zero first of the month, it's like, well, what could have been. But I don't know. I guess the biggest thing that I got out of taking a step back from that world is my integrity's intact, and I couldn't really ask for anything more. That's a beautiful thing that I was on a pretty sure path to have lost at some point if I kept going in that direction. And I don't know, I always just I had this realization when I was like 16. I was doing some like Disney stuff and not really stuff up my alley. I got my start in like a kind of like a sci-fi mind bender, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I totally want to do this for the rest of my life. And then, I hit the age and the Hollywood, and they were like, I know Disney. I was like, oh, great. Okay, here we go. And I hit the point when I was like 16 where I was like, I think I want to just stop this for a bit and see what life's all about outside of this like preset path that I was kind of following. And I was 8 when I started out in this world, so I didn't really have much time to think about it or understand the implications of, in essence, losing my sovereignty to the wild, weird world of Hollywood. And I'm really glad that 16-year-old me was able to reclaim that. And I've found a lot of stability and awareness in my life since then, and it's a cool thing.
That is incredible. And it's funny because so many times in our life we think we're on a certain trajectory, and I have the benefit of being 44. So I've had numerous trajectories that have turned to ash on me at some point along the trajectory, and it's just because I've learned something about myself that led me to make a choice that changed what I valued, changed what I prioritized. But looking back, you recognize that while all of those experiences and skills that you may have learned and things that you went through and everything aren't necessarily contributing to the path that you're on in the way that they would, they still are, right? Like everything that you ever went through, every challenge, every obstacle, every person, even just standing up and saying, I'd like to change my path now. All of that's taught you how to be yourself a little bit more, right? And decide what that is without letting other people dictate what that is for you. So I think that's an incredible path.
Yeah, 100%. It's nice, I think it's very stabilizing to take a step back and be like, well, where's this path headed? And do I want to go down that path, or do I want to take this fork in the road and see what happens that way? And yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's almost like recognizing the influence that you have over your life again, as opposed to being directed and dictated by everyone around you, typically for selfish reasons, for their own personal shit that they've been going through. But not to dig too deep into everything you just were discussing, that you were dealing with when you were younger, but that sci-fi thriller that you mentioned before is actually how we first came across you, and it was a movie that we watched. I know it's one of Ray's favorite movies, Ink. And so I'm just curious. I know you were pretty young when you filmed that, but if you've seen that since and the impact of that as you were younger, because you mentioned you really enjoyed it and you're like, oh, this is dope, like more of this, and then things shifted and changed, you got into Disney and whatnot. But was there anything from that movie that stuck? Because we did a whole episode on that, and we saw a lot of interesting things, and I've seen some of your content and I could see some of that maybe I don't know, having an impact, or you maybe experiencing certain things from that, and maybe it's sticking with you. So I'd love to hear if you have any additional
Certainly.
thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole movie that changed my entire life. I actually just rewatched it this morning because I wanted to brush up, and if there was any questions coming, I wanted to be sure that I didn't sound like a big dummy. Um, it was really trippy to watch because I was 8 years old when we filmed that, and life was all sunshine and rainbows, and I didn't really have deep introspective thoughts going on at that time. I mean, I did, but like a whole different level of them, naturally. And rewatching it really made it plain to me that that movie had a big impact on my psychology and like the way I think and the way I feel and view the world. And it's honestly like such a blessing because the parts of me that I really love about me, I feel like are partially due in part to the like deep-minded individuals I worked with on that set. And being the only kid around for all those days we were filming, and going to festivals and Q&As and all that, it was just really a profound experience, and definitely pushed some buttons in my brain and activated some stuff that I don't think most 8-year-olds get activated at that age. And yeah, I think that's shit. I just rewatched it. I cried like 5 times. I was like, this is beautiful. Like, what, neither here nor there that I'm in it, but like just the essence of the film is just amazing. You got this whole redemption arc going in it, and kind of just really, I don't know, profound. I don't know how else to put it. It's just really got me thinking and like analyzing that, and to tie it back in with my swapping of life paths. In the movie, it follows a guy who is going down a bad path. He's not headed in a good direction, and it the moral of the movie is you can change that. It's never too late to redeem yourself and to be that which you were intended to be instead of that which you've become.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. I was lucky enough to stumble across it, I think, a year after it came out. Just fantastic. And again, a redemption arc. Absolutely. But your part in that movie was very well played. And I think it's just because, and I always find it funny because you were saying how the movie affected you over the rest of your life. But I think possibly the reason that you were in the movie at all was because you were already reflecting a lot of those characteristics and somebody would have seen it within you.
Absolutely. I mean, I would like to think. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I was always kind of a deep little minded child, and thinking about the things, thinking outside the box, and that's definitely followed me through life. I've had a lot of steep ups and steep downs with the way that my brain works, and naturally.
Yeah. No, I can only imagine both the impacts and the the things you learn, because at that age it's like you're soaking up so much, but it's not quite at a point that you're comprehending necessarily. So it always makes me wonder when we go through situations like that where we maybe don't necessarily have vivid memories of it, it's like it's still all in there, though, that entire experience, the people that you worked with, because you know the minds that created that film, I can only imagine how they saw the world, how they saw things. And so to work with them that closely, like it inevitably would have an impact on things like that. And so in regards to, being an actor throughout your life, how and then kind of seeing a shift in yourself. Like I know previously actors who have, explored some deeper insights and deeper parts of themselves have mentioned, like Jim Carrey, for example, comes to mind, that his acting career allowed him to more clearly recognize that Jim Carrey was just another character that he played. And so I'm curious if that has played any role for yourself in questioning Quinn and the seriousness with which you take Quinn's sort of character, or how maybe lightly you take it. And it sounds like it's been relatively light since your willingness to kind of flow with how things are going.
Yeah, that's the I've heard a lot about, steadily working actors taking a step back and being like, well, who am I? The great question of life right there. Who am I? And I was actually talking to my roommates about it last night. They, like, I guess didn't really know that I was a child actor and broke the news to them last night. And they were like, oh, well, like, can you act right now? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm in a constant state of that. Like, as are you. Like how we show up in the world is always like, it's always something. It's always for somebody, whether it's for yourself or something outside of yourself. The way that we display ourselves is like, it's more so you're just bearing witness to the character that is flowing through you, rather than actually being that character. It's like, if you get into the concept that like we're just the observers, and so I'm just observing Quinn be Quinn in whatever way she chose to be today, and the awareness that is truly me is kind of just along for the ride. So I kind of, yeah, I've listened to a lot of Jim Carrey's interviews. He's got a lot of interesting, crazy, zany things to say, and I appreciate that, because I can relate to that, where like, people, I've had ex-boyfriends be like, I don't believe you, you're acting, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, like I don't know what to tell you. We all are, all the time. That's just the way it is. It's just the life we're living. And just try and keep it as authentic as possible. And what does that even mean? Who knows?
I like something you said there, regarding not just performing for others, but also for yourself. And I think people forget that, or rather they would like to forget that, when they are acting like they are less than they actually are. It's very hard for us to go, yeah, I'm kind of just doing that to myself, right? And so we want to believe that it's real. We want to have our justifications, like, no, I'm not just acting like I can't do that. I really can't. Here are all my reasons. And meanwhile, you're just like, well done. That's a good scene right there. And they don't see it, and they kind of get angry when you bring it up that way. But that's funny.
Yeah, that's a good way to bring it up. I'm gonna put that in my pocket and save it for later. Because yeah, pretty much. It's a nice little avoidance tactic we all have.
Right. And it brings into question even, how we're perceiving things. So if we are just that observer, right, you're observing Quinn not too differently than how you're observing everyone else. And it's almost like every projection and idea that you hold on to is just coming from you. And this is something I've been just chewing on a bit more recently, how much, without an idea of another person, it's not that they don't exist, but they exist kind of differently. Like all of the ideas that we hold on to of things in general, right? They just kind of exist in our head, including our idea of ourself. And so we talk about this on the podcast plenty, but without those ideas, it's like what's left is just what is. And so and I find, and I'm curious if you've dug into this at all, but people get very uncomfortable when they start to realize that, oh, that person and how they're acting, what they're doing, my perception of their judgment of me is really just coming from me. like they're doing something or saying something, but it's all just coming from me. And so it really is like all of reality isn't really outside our mind. It's like kind of inside our mind in a sense. And there's a shift. And I think it was kind of along the lines of how you felt going from, you said taking your sovereignty back for your life. It's like you started to have take back more of the influence that you always had over your situation, and the projections from other people that were just stemming from you maybe weren't having quite the impact anymore. And so along those lines, I guess I'm just curious, like how often you wonder about that, of the ideas that we hold on to and the labels and the names, and how without them, I guess it gets a little more obvious that things aren't quite as divided as we like to think, and that maybe it is just, not really separate from us in a way.
Yeah, I've viewed the world in that way for quite some time now. I honestly, like, when I started messing with psychedelics, that kind of poked a hole through the whole like idea of separation. And so yeah, I was actually just talking to a friend about this the other day, how there's a version of me that's his friend, and we have the conversations that we have. But then with my other friends, I'm a whole different person having whole different conversations and a whole different relationship with this other person. And like there's really no consistency in my display between other interactions I'm having with other people in the world. I like you said, it's a reflection. So I reflect whatever those people are pitching at me, I reflect it back, and really it could just be me pitching that at me, and then they're just receiving the catch, like. And I don't know, I think it's a really cool thing because it makes me feel very multifaceted when I realize that like the relationships I have in my life are so entirely unique and bring out a whole different little side of myself. And it makes me kind of feel like I can do anything I want to do.
Exactly. You're adaptable, and you've learned to be so by going through so many experiences. I do have a question for you, because one thing I've noticed is as we start to recognize that we are, at the end of the day, putting on a performance for others to be liked, or for ourselves, however we need to, you start to recognize that everybody else is doing it too.
Yeah.
And that one can be a little bit jarring at first, because you almost don't want to see it that way. Like you'd almost prefer their drama to somewhat be about you, rather than just being for their own benefit one way or another. How did you deal with coming to that? Because it can be really frustrating. It can be hard to find empathy for people when you see them doing something that you work hard not to do. So I'm just very curious as to how that journey went for you.
You know, I don't know. I think that one's kind of always been a little bit innate for me. And maybe it was like all the acting classes and stuff growing up, but I feel like an extremely, like, almost too, at times, almost too forgiving of a person. And I think it's really hard for me to not find empathy, and hard for me to stay mad at people, and to like I don't know. It's just people are easy to reason with if you can reason with yourself, because I have my moments where I'm a total asshole. And when I see other people being a total asshole, you just got to kind of recognize that that's not them. That's just them in this little blip of time. And that'll pass. And then they can get back to being whatever they want to be. And if they want to be an asshole, then wonderful. I'm going to let them do that. And I'm going to honor that, because that's all I can do. I'm not going to throw myself into the crossfire of that internal battle that they're going through.
Oh yeah. No, well said. Yeah, that goddamn free will, right? Can't quite get people to do everything you want all the time. But yeah, I find that kind of it goes hand in hand, right? The fear of judgment and the judgment we have of others, like it's almost directly tied together. So it makes sense that as you've gotten easier with yourself, you've gotten easier with other people, as you've been more honest with yourself about what you can be, we can all be an asshole, piece of shit, all that stuff. You get more empathetic towards everyone that you interact with. And it isn't so much it's coming from a different place, right? It's coming from that empathetic spot, which is ultimately what all this comes back to. Because if you can see, like, for me, usually someone asks me like my definition of empathy, it's being able to see that, if you had the same upbringing as someone else, same parents, same situation, same everything, like you would do the same exact thing that they would do. And that goes from the best of humanity to the worst of the worst of humanity, and beyond even just humanity, from like the volcano exploding to the sun shower to, the bugs crawling across the ground. It's that willingness to see that connectivity and not almost like not wanting it to be different, because you see the importance and the vitality in infinite potential, like in all of the experiences. This is really just kind of the universe having all the experiences. And so to judge it from like a tower or something looking down, you force yourself to maintain an idea of you, but you're kind of just building it on your own insecurities. So when you really break it down, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to want things to be different, because you take that far enough. And I kind of like taking things to extremes sometimes. If you want someone to be different, it's like, where does that end up? You controlling everything? Do you want ultimate control of everything, for everything to be exactly the way that you want the world to be? Like that would, maybe for a week or two, it would be kind of fun to explore, but you get tired of it pretty quick. And I know I'm just preaching to the choir here, but I find it interesting how people really are just reflecting their own insecurities. The judgments they have of others are typically the judgments they have of themselves. And that empathy really just stems from a place of understanding, of recognition, of seeing yourself in the people that you're interacting with.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like the extremes, it really puts it into perspective. And I feel like like there's a lot of discomfort in being alive and showing up in the world. And like, the insecurities come from that discomfort. And like, perfect example, back in the acting days, like going into like a commercial audition, worst ever, most uncomfortable, horrifying, embarrassing stuff ever. Hated it. But it like kind of makes you take a step back and be like, it's just a moment in time, and I had to be real weird for that camera so that they could maybe give me money. But like, um yeah, I you got to lean into the discomfort of life and the insecurities, and kind of that's like where the magic is, really, is just pushing through that and putting yourself out there. Like, I, for years since I stopped acting, have been genuinely terrified to like display myself to the crazy wide world of technology. And honestly, when you guys hit me up to be on this podcast, I was like, oh shit, like I don't know how to human in front of all the other humans, and that makes me nervous. And I've had a few people ask me to be on their podcasts in the past, and I was like, nope, can't do it. Sorry, don't want anybody to know that I exist. And and like, yeah, I'm working through that. And it took me a while to work through that. It's been a few years of trying to be like, hey, it's okay, and you don't need to worry about what the people think about you, and just keep doing you. And like, I have no problem doing that in the waking world. I never have. But as soon as like technology and computers and cameras and all that gets involved, it's a little scary for me, which is, you wouldn't think would be the case given that I grew up doing that. But I don't know, it's a little fear of being known. I think we've all got a little bit of that going on in the world. And with the rise of TikTok, there's a whole different box of frogs going with that. And people are showing up however they feel they need to, and sometimes it's weird, sometimes it's cool, sometimes it's dumb, but like I love it. I'm happy for the people who are doing what they do.
We really appreciate you being on the podcast with us. The nice thing about our audience is that everybody is aware that you're a person just like them, and that we're not, in fact, humans in the conceptual term. We're just sitting here having a conversation as one awareness. And so you don't have to worry too much about our audience here, but I really do appreciate the effort it is to come on here, especially given, again, the loss of sovereignty that you felt when you were younger, the fact that you had to pull away. I can imagine that there would be a little bit of anxiety in terms of just even approaching that world again. So I'm grateful that you have. I would say I think it's a great sign that you felt that you could do that, given the time that you've spent away. The fact that you could even come onto the podcast and face that anxiety at all, I'd say that's a tremendous accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It was a nice little, and like, there's a little domino effect in life. Right after you guys hit me up, I got a call from somebody and they were like, I want you to be in my movie. And I was like, okay. Okay. So we'll see if that happens, because SAG-AFTRA's on strike, and they're trying to like burn independent films to the ground and replace us all with AI or whatever they're trying to do. So we'll see what happens. That's not set in stone, but I feel like the universe is finally calling me back to my roots, and I'm not gonna deny it. I'm not gonna say no and laugh in the face of the universe or whatnot. And I guess my biggest thing with like my biggest apprehension with going back into the whole acting world was that like I wanted to maintain my sovereignty and keep that integrity, and like with the whole, there's like the agents and the managers, and you got to take all these classes and you got to do all this stuff, and this is all going to cost you so much money. And like I don't want to do any of that, because that that goes against my sovereignty and my integrity. And I told my mom was super upset when I told her I wasn't gonna keep pursuing the acting thing. I was like, I want to do things my way, and I don't want to work at the whims of everybody else and basically be a money machine for a bunch of people who sit in their corner offices and make phone calls all day. And yeah, I have something greater in mind, something that I did for me, and not yeah, just doing it for other people because they want me to. And I'm gonna do it my way, and I've stuck with that since I was 16. And finally I got a random phone call being like, hey, and I was like, hey, I think this is my way. I think this might be my way. So we'll see what happens with all that.
That's awesome. And it feels great, because even though things don't always work out while you're doing it your way, you're doing it your way. Right. And so when they do, you're like, yeah, because it feels so much more rewarding. I know I spent most of my life living for other people. It took me a long time to figure out I had to live for me. That was when my life very much turned around. But that's incredible. I think it's fantastic that you're on this journey. I would say that perhaps you're getting the call because you've decided you're ready to, and you did that in deciding to be on the podcast. And that doesn't mean it has to go anywhere, but it certainly means that you are continuing to grow as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely an internal thing. Definitely an I'm ready type thing that I don't even recognize really happened. But I think a lot of it was tied into sobriety. I got sober a few months ago. I was a big weed smoker, and for like a long time, like since I was like 13, all day, every day, like my life depended on it. And it was just not healthy, not the way that I should have been living. And I was doing the alcohol thing for a bit, being young in my 20s and whatnot. And I was like, I need to be done with this. And so I got sober. I think a lot of doors opened for me, like almost immediately. It was kind of weird. Just like straight away. It's like that those substances were holding me back from not only awareness of, like, pure unrefined awareness or whatever, but awareness and just the ability to deal with the trials of life without finding some really stupid way of coping.
That's interesting. Yeah, the big shift is in responsibility, right? And sometimes you have to get away from that stuff to take responsibility. It's too easy to lean on. And so that's a big shift for sure. I'll pass it over to Andrew now. I keep cutting in.
No, you're good. But yeah, Quinn, what you were saying earlier, in regards to your shift now and the potential to re-enter, that space, it kind of reminds me of the quote. I think it's applicable to this. I'm not entirely sure, but in the world, but not of it. And the recognition that despite a certain industry from an overarching perspective, maybe is, manipulative, take advantage of people. Like there's a lot of people making a lot of the money and kind of take advantage of those who are actually doing the stuff. There is still always the potential, right? And given our current society, the way it's structured, it's like it doesn't change overnight, but we're the change that happens. So as you even are willing to re-enter with the point of view that you have, and who's to say that all of your experiences when you were younger aren't going to very much inform your perspective now to even have more of a impact than you would have been able to have if you hadn't left and came back. And again, this is just me hypothesizing, but it's kind of cool when you come back to a certain situation or a certain place that you have a lot of past experiences with, but with a totally new mentality, because now it's like there's so much influence that can be had in a situation like that, in a movie. It's an expression of yourself that then gets pushed a little further. And it's not to say that it has more impact than moment to moment interactions, but it has the potential to make pretty significant ripples. And so it's just interesting to me that in your story that you went through all of that time kind of honing all of these skills, right? When you were younger, acting skills, and then kind of took a hiatus. And it's not to say that you're going to jump back in the way that you were, but it was able to kind of shift your perspective a bit and then come back and utilize the skills that you had and grew when you were younger to then come at it from like a multifaceted approach of understanding all the shit going on, but also being able to have that impact. And so I just always find it funny how kind of seamless our experiences are and how appropriate everything we've been through is for everything that we're going through and everything that we will go through. And a lot of times people like to look back on their life and be like, oh, I wish this hadn't happened. I wish that hadn't happened. But everything starts to shift when you start to see the importance of everything, even the really like fucked up shit where people were just had their heads so far up their asses that they had no sensitivity to anyone or anything. Cause then that's when you're able to really start doing things from a spot of just that pure influence and awareness without so many of those ideas holding you back necessarily. And so it's cool to see this in your life and this change and just I don't know, from my perspective as someone who maybe doesn't know you super well, just how seamless it seems, as it always is for everyone. It's just our thoughts about the way things should have or could have been that kind of get in the way and divert us from the recognition that they were as they are, and that way was perfect. Not always amazing, but at least perfect.
Yeah, I like that. What you were talking about is it made me think of that scene in Ink where the Pathfinder guy with the X's over his eyes, Jacob, is conducting the chain reaction He's finding the links for the chain, and everything happens because of the last thing that happens, and the next thing is going to happen because of what's happening right now. And I think that that's just a really beautiful, that scene was just so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Like, incredibly done. Like, it gives me chills every time. And that's just like such a nice little parable for life right there. Like, you wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for the shit that happened 15 years ago. And here I am. And here you are. That's awesome.
That said, it dawned on me that your life has essentially went from performance to service, which is what you're doing right now, working with people in a different way, talking to them, relating to them, which is, of course, using all of the skills that you've learned about just being yourself and what it means to not be yourself and all of that. What do you make of that shift in your life?
It's still a performance every day. Work in a biker bar, and it's just a bunch of old dudes all leathered up, drinking beers and whiskey and riding Harleys, and it's great. It's really great. It's taught me how to like kind of deal with, well, I mean, I've worked in a lot of different service environments. I've done the fine dining, I've worked in tea shops, and kind of like had all walks of life come in the service industry. It's kind of unavoidable. And I'd like to think I'm pretty damn good at it. It's what it comes down to is like, not forgetting what they ordered, but also just playing into who they are and showing them a good time, and making friends and making connection. And like, that's what I love about my job. And of course, not all people in the service industry do that. A lot of people I've worked with over the years, they're just like, hey, what do you want to drink? All right, cool. Here it is. But like, I make friends, because if I have to work a stupid job to pay my stupid bills, I'm gonna make it fun. That's all I can do. And I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all, because I'm making it fun and I'm making connections, and it is a performance. It's, who is this person and what do they want to see? And that's what I deliver, sometimes better than others. But
It's totally fair. It's also about what you want to see, right? Like, what's the experience I want to have? I don't want to have an experience where everybody's bummed out. So I'm going to be, the influence that's going to draw the room, as it were. And I wonder how much of that, because it does take a certain degree of will to be able to just put yourself out there and be the uplifting force. It does take some practice to be able to just stand out there and kind of be naked in front of everybody for the sake of them not feeling so heavy in themselves. Do you think that's been largely influenced by your performance background?
I'd say, yeah, with all those thousands of dollars spent on acting classes, um, I'd say I have a pretty good handle on the improv of life. And yeah, just kind of keep it exciting. You gotta, otherwise you just fall into the pit of despair. And I've seen people come into the places I've worked that are in the pit of despair. I'm like, okay, how can I throw them a rope? It's not my job to throw them a rope, but I might as well try, see what can be done, because I ain't got anything better to do right now. I'm at work.
Fuck yeah. That's well said. And it just goes to show your combination of a sensitivity, as well as the tools of having, like, being able to kind of know what to do, or at least have enough experiences where there's something to pull from in that. And it really does, like, most of life comes down to that. Like, the situation is more or less irrelevant to your willingness to make the most of the situation, right? And it's not to say that situations don't vary and differ. Some are fucking terrible, some are incredibly easy and enjoyable, but there is an ability to have influence over it. So you can make a shitty situation more shitty or less shitty. You can make a great situation shitty, which a lot of people do. They make awesome situations piles of shit. or, a little bit better, or at least appreciate it for what it is. And we always have that influence because, we're not disconnected from the situation, right? There's not really anything separate from us. So it makes sense that although we can't make things exactly the way we want them necessarily, because as we were talking about before, maybe that isn't really what we want, that ultimate control, but we do have almost like the perfect degree of potential influence over something that, the more of us start recognizing that we do have degrees of influence, that we aren't forced into thinking of a situation in the way that other people are thinking about it because they don't want to accept the responsibility of having influence over that situation, which is a degree of responsibility. As much as when you put it the way you put it, it's like, yeah, it totally fucking makes sense. Like if you have an ability to impact or influence a situation, like might as well do what you can to make it a little bit better or a little bit lighter or a little bit, seeing someone having a down day, throwing them a rope, like might as well. It makes sense, but there has to be a willingness to look beyond yourself and your own preferences and the story that you're telling yourself. So, I mean, do you find in those situations that because you're not necessarily thinking about yourself or prioritizing the way you think things should be, that you're able to see the way that things are a little bit more clearly and then act with a little bit more sensitivity than maybe you would if you were caught up in, a woe is me or more of a selfish mentality than the one that you have?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the way I see it is like it doesn't cost me anything. And like we seem to live in a world that's like centered around money, which is why I have a job and like have to do it. It's like I have to be there already. And sometimes I have really bad days. And lately my life has been a dumpster fire, quite honestly. It's been a mess. I've been sleeping on hardwood floor for the past 2 weeks in a room full of boxes and cats. And like, I'm about to hit my breaking point a little bit. But it's still like compartmentalize that and put that off to the side and be here now. And you're not currently sleeping on the hardwood floor. I'm here talking to you guys, and that's great. And just a little moment of reprieve from whatever bullshit's going on in life, and whatever bullshit that's neither here nor there. That's it's happening around you. It's always going to be happening around you. So what can you do to, in a way, almost be avoidant of that? To like put it harshly plain, it's like, let's avoid the chaos that surrounds me and let's pretend it doesn't exist and make someone's day a little better, try and make my day a little better. And it's healthy avoidance. Yeah.
I don't know if I would necessarily call it avoidance so much as just putting it down for a time period. I mean, this is something that in life coaching, for example, you can't bring yourself into your coaching. Like you can't bring your life and your drama into a session with somebody. You have to leave it at the door. You have to be free of whatever narrative came with you to the office. And it's not that it's avoidance necessarily as the recognition that I can't do anything about it right now. Like this is not the time. Right. And that takes some maturity in itself. That takes maturity to be able to say, like, right, there's always going to be some shit to deal with. It'll sit there. It's not going anywhere. I'm sure it'll be there when I come back to it. And so, yeah, just the recognition that, it's not avoidance necessarily, as an understanding that sometimes the only thing you can do is let something sit. One of the most valuable lessons I've had in my life is that there are times when I can do something and times when I can't. And when I can't do something about that thing, I don't think about it. I don't think about it because it's just taking up energy and it's taking up attention that I could be learning something else about my life in that moment when I can't do that one thing. Right. So I just want to throw that out there quickly. I don't think you're avoiding it so much as compartmentalizing it for the sake of allowing yourself the space that you need to be able to do what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess avoidance was more just a little funny way to put it. Because sometimes it does feel that way, though, because I watch it sit for a few days and I'm like, oh boy. And, it just starts to weigh on you a little bit more and more. And you just go and forget about it more and more. And then you got to take the time to find the resolve, and life goes on.
Don't judge the journey. That's the whole thing. I have slept on many a hardwood floor and many an outdoor grass, so I get it. There are ups and downs to all of it, but it sounds like your attitude towards this is perfect, and that I always refer to them as compression periods. It's like your life all of a sudden feels a little bit more tense and a little bit more pressure than it usually does, and it's largely because of all the changes that you've gone through. And so change must happen around you, and so you kind of just got to weather it until you clear that compression period, and then all of a sudden you've got your space again, and you can look back and go, oh wow, I really learned a lot from that. But in the meantime, you're just doing the best you can to get through.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. I feel like the relevance is what it comes down to for me. Like, is this situation that I'm going through and taking it with me, is it relevant to the situation that I'm in or not? Like, is it going to make it easier or tougher for me to deal with this thing? And it's usually if we're maintaining a bunch of stories and ideas in our head, and even labels. It's not to say that letting go of a label of a certain situation immediately makes it better, but it almost allows it to continue to process a little bit more seamlessly in a way. And I certainly have found that when I'm going through something, it's like coming back to the uncertainty of the situation, coming back to the recognition that, yeah, this fucking sucks ass right now and it's super uncomfortable and I'm not having a good time, but I don't know what's next. I don't really know what's happening right now. And that's it's not usually, it's always where we're at. We never really know what's going on, from even the most minute situation to the broader perspective. But that in itself, there's like a discomfort there, right? Uncertainty can be uncomfortable because it's like you're floating, or you're free, you're in space floating around. Or it's like an example I've used in the past is when I'm walking my dog and she's pulling on the leash, pulling on the leash, and then she stops doing it and there's some slack, and all of a sudden I don't really know where she is if I'm not looking, because I've lost that tension. And so I find that in our lives we do that too, but the certainties that we hold on to are also the tethers, right? Like, we're going through a situation, we're like, this is terrible, my life is going to shit, everything's awful, and it's like it gives us that certainty to get rid of that discomfort that we were feeling from floating through space, whatever, which is the state of freedom as well. It's like being in a prison and the walls coming down. You're like, I don't know what's out there. It's like, yeah, that's what freedom is. You don't know. You never know. And so we'll trade that state of freedom for the cessation of the uncertainty being just false certainty, because it doesn't mean we know. It's just, to get rid of that initial feeling. And so I sometimes find when I'm getting caught in something and labeling it, trying to find a certainty, it keeps me there in a sense. It keeps me in that spot maybe a little bit longer than I would, or at least until I recognize that, oh yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, I feel like shit right now, and I think it's because of this, but honestly, I don't know. And then it's like when the story stops being such a recycled thing going on, continuing to tell myself what I'm going through, where I'm at, how I'm doing relative to everyone else, that kind of drops. And then it's like the change that was happening until I started telling myself a story is allowed to continue on. And so again, it's not to say that letting go of the false certainty makes everything incredible and sunshine and rainbows, but it does at least allow us to see things for how they are, as opposed to how we think they are, which is never actually how they are, just because we're trying to avoid the inherent uncertainty of whatever we're going through.
Absolutely. The lack of knowing is oddly comforting. You feel like you don't have to fake it when you don't know what's going on. And I've been in a state of I don't really know what's going on for a few years now, and I think it's going pretty well. I'm just do what needs to be done and wait for the wild things to happen, and they do. And when they do, it's like, oh, cool. I have no idea what's going to come of this, but I don't know, it just keeps life exciting when you're all tethered down and you know exactly what you're going to eat for breakfast tomorrow and scheduled down to the minute. of your day, of your week, of your month. It's like, where's the magic in that?
Agreed. I think the advantage of age is that you start to recognize exactly how many twists and turns life really takes. Whereas when you're younger, you tend to think it's more of a linear, from here to there. Once I get there, everything's gonna be fine. And so as you do that, as you go in the ups and downs and whatnot, you really start to learn, like, oh, there's no ceiling. If I don't want to say what's possible, I really don't know. And there's a lot of freedom in that. There's a lot of fear too, but I think that that's really the big switch in our life, is when I don't know goes from being terrifying to exciting, right? And I definitely get that feeling from you throughout your journey, is that you've been leaning more towards the I don't know, let's find out kind of thing. And I think that's fantastic. Out of curiosity, just because of all of your life experience and your experience with people and different trajectories, and just it's been a full experience from everything I've gathered so far. Have you ever considered getting into the other end of the creative side, the writing or the directing?
Absolutely. Yes. So I feel like I was born to be a writer. Like it's just something I've always been really good at. I I don't know. The hard thing for me is ties right back into what we were just talking about, the knowing. I'd never know. I don't know. So how can I write something that's concise and followable and, has its climax and its resolution when I don't know what the hell's going on ever? And I'm okay with that. And so writing is something that I would love to work towards, and I've been thinking about it for many years. I'm just I'm not there yet, and who's to say tomorrow I won't be, but in this current moment, I I don't know what's going on with that, but I do like the idea of doing things like I talked about earlier, my way. And ultimately, I think that something really great will manifest one day from this mind I have, and we'll see what happens. But I've done a lot of reading and researching really crazy things in my life. So I kind of want to try it and find a way to tie all that together. I'm big into like the magic and the fantasy and all that. So it'll probably be something along those lines. But who knows? It could be a World War II movie. Who knows?
With magic, possibly.
With magic.
I share that love of writing. It's definitely something that I appreciate, and I've always appreciated how different authors take different strategies. I think it was Neil Gaiman who was saying that sometimes he even just comes up with an ending. Like he'll just be like, "Oh, that would be an awesome ending," and then he kind of fills in the space afterwards. And I've always really appreciated that. So, however it is you come to create, I think it's really important to note that you're already manifesting it. Like it's so interesting that we don't recognize how much we're doing, because we don't recognize the magnitude of what it is we're creating in our life until finally we get there and we're like, oh wow, it's been leading here. And then all of a sudden, all of those things we thought didn't have any purpose at all do. And again, I say this after 44 years. I've been dreaming of what it is we're doing now for over half my life, and doing jobs that I thought would never lead anywhere close to here. Jobs where I'm just like, I'm just paying the bill so I can keep eating, all that. And you learn so much about yourself, and more importantly, so much about how much you're holding yourself back. And so you just keep jumping in. And it's the beautiful part about this journey, is that you are manifesting it. It's just that you haven't gotten to a point where it's clear how. Right. So I'm very excited for you, Quinn.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that you said I am manifesting it, because I very much feel that. I feel like I've been telling my friends for years, oh yeah, I'm writing a movie. I'm writing a TV series. They're like, what's it about? I'm like, I don't know. Not there yet.
Oh, it's the best place to start. I think the knowledge is actually what gets in the way of the expression of it. Like starting from carte blanche. And it's like, yeah, you're just reality creating something as you go and finding out as you go. Right. Because if you know it going in, it's like kind of like it's already happened, and it's also not going to be it. So if anything, the knowledge of what it's going to be is just going to get in the way of what it ends up being. But like I was saying before, we hold on to that knowledge because it gives us some security, as opposed to recognizing I don't know, but I'll find out because I have faith in myself. And I don't know how it's going to go, but how it goes is kind of irrelevant to any measurement of me because I'm measurable. My value can't be measured. So how it turns out, how it's judged, everyone's judgments are just projections of their own judgments, and so it starts to unravel, and there's a freedom in that not knowing. Like it really is where that freedom lies, and so we do our best to kind of maintain that on the podcast, going into episodes. Like, I have no fucking idea how it's gonna go. And then we finish it, and it's like, I don't even fucking know what we said, but it's just being in it. It's being willing to be in it without holding on so tightly to the sides, kind of like slowing yourself down in a sense. So going into it with that I don't know mentality and then just stepping into it and taking one step and another step. It's not to say, especially in that context, like you don't have to have the story all figured out before you do it, but story will unravel with every step that you take. And it's just, one more thought, one more word, one more paragraph. And then before you know it, it's like, oh shit, that's a pretty dope story. And there it is.
It's like that chain reaction, one thing leads to another and the story tells itself.
Exactly. And I think that is an excellent place to end this episode. Quinn, I cannot thank you enough for being here on the podcast. I was personally excited. As I said, Ink is one of my favorite movies. I've shown it to my own daughter. She is 16. She saw it when I think she was about 10, and she was inspired by your performance and your character. So this has just been a dream come true for me. Thank you for making the time for us. And I just want to say before I pass it on to Andrew that I'm hoping we can touch base with you sometime in the future and have you back on the podcast to tell us what you're up to.
I would absolutely love that. And I'm super glad I got to talk to you both. This is wonderful. And I'm glad I took that little leap into the unknown to be here with you both today. And thanks for everything, guys. I appreciate you reaching out, and I would love to do this again sometime.
Thank you so much, Quinn, for making this what it was. Yeah, we appreciate you taking that little leap, and everything you shared here was pretty incredible. So I appreciate you very much, and stay tuned. We got a lot of ideas in the works. We're not going to be stopping for a while, and who's to say that we're thinking about a book right now, and movies, shows, performance-based things in the future in regards to along the lines of what we just talked about today. So thank you again so much for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to our next chat.
Y'all are awesome. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.